Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Well, hello there. Once again, Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. So good to have you along for the 30 minutes. I hope stick in for the entire thing. Stick around. You'll learn lots. John Scholes here, and joining me momentarily, Lior Samfiru from EmploymentLawyer.ca. You can always reach out to Lior, have a discussion on your own time, 1-855-821-5900. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca, and the website, which will come up a couple times during the show, that would be PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. The beauty about that is it's free. It's anonymous for you to use. You can learn a ton about workplace rights, and baked into that is the severance calculator, which you're free to use anytime as well, and discover what severance really should be for you. We'll drill down that a little further as the show goes on, and the main topic is what employers should never do. We'll get to that later on, and some phone calls from one of our radio shows across the GTA as well. That's all been said, Lior. It's time for the week that was. What do you got going on, pal?
Great to be here. Great to be talking about employment law. And great to have this opportunity to talk to all our good viewers and educate you a bit about this very, very important topic. We've been doing this for a while. We're going to continue doing this for a while because we all have jobs and we need to get the message out that we have rights as well. Those rights that you have, those employment law rights, they do you no good unless you know what those rights are, unless you understand how to enforce them. And that's the point of the show. We tell you what you need to know, we tell you what the law does for you, and we tell you how to trigger those rights. How do you take advantage of them? So whether you lose your job or lost your job, or you were looking at that 3-page severance letter, trying to make sense of it, we'll tell you what that means and what your rights are. Maybe you're dealing with the bad boss, workplace harassment, a poison work environment. We'll tell you what to do in those situations. Maybe it's a situation now where your business is closing that you're working at, or your job has changed. You're being relocated somewhere far away. Well, what do you do? What do you say? What does the law do for you? On the show, we cover those topics. And of course, we have 30 minutes here. If we don't get to your topic, if you want to have a private chat with me and my team, easy to do. Throughout the show, we'll give you that contact information. Don't be bashful. Let's connect and let's do it that way. But of course, always like to start off with the situation that came across my desk. Now, this has happened to me before when I get contacted by someone that loses their job and they're very concerned about the issue that they shouldn't be concerned about. So let me give you an example from something that came on my desk this week. I spoke with a lady who was let go very recently. She had worked for her employer for 3 years, and she called me because she was very upset and mad, frankly, that the record of employment wasn't accurate. It had her start date as 2021. She had started there in 2020. And for some reason that she didn't know, her employer got the start date on the record of employment wrong. She contacted them. They didn't respond to her. So she called me very upset. She says, I can't have this record of employment say 2021 when I started it a year earlier. So let's break this down. The record of employment, as long as you get your full EI, which you really need just under a year to do that, doesn't matter if your start date is in 2020 or 2015, it's not going to affect anything. So there's actually nothing to worry about. But here's the thing. They had offered her 6-week severance, which she thought it was fine. She was in fact owed 6 months severance. She didn't realize that. She didn't call me about that. She called me because of her record of employment. I get this so often. She was shocked to learn that she's owed severance, that she was in fact wrongfully dismissed, because 6-week severance is a lot less than what she's owed. Oftentimes, I see people calling me after they lose their job. They're worried about their vacation pay that they're owed, or that the company owes them some overtime, all of which are legitimate things to worry about. But the big issue, the real issue, whenever you lose your job is severance. That's literally where the money is, okay? So that's why whenever you lose your job, the first thing to focus on is your severance, because chances are whatever the company's offered you is not adequate. And whatever other issues you may still have are a lot smaller than that big one. Always contact me if you lose your job, and let's talk about your severance.
Is it not, Lior, because everybody assumes, oh, it's the big company, they've got HR, they should know what I'm what I should have for severance. Why would they be wrong? This is what they do.
And they must be treating me fairly. I know it's a big company. Well, guess what? Doesn't work that way. If it did, I wouldn't have 50 lawyers in 3 provinces doing this every single day. The reason is, the reality is that in over 90% of the cases, when you lose your job, big company, small company, good company, or not so good a company, the severance that you're offered is not adequate. It's not even close to being adequate. So that's what the focus always must be if you lose that job.
All right, we tell you every week that you can join Lior and I on our radio shows weekly, especially here in the GTA on News Talk 1010, Sundays at 1 p.m. We had a great week this past week, a lot of phone calls. We encourage you to do so. Same thing, call into the radio station, ask your questions. You got a complete hour to do so. We cherry pick some of those, we play them back here, and we dissect them a little bit and talk about them. So phone call number 1 from our radio show, Lior, is coming up right now.
I have been working for the same employer for the last 26 years without a contract. Recently, my employer has decided to pass the business on to his son. In the meantime, he has handed me a contract, which he is telling me I need to sign at this point because the pre-existing company name, which he now changed, is no longer in effect, and therefore I am not entitled to a severance. So I have already decided I'm not signing that contract, and in the meantime, they have started to make my life difficult, making my job difficult, excluding me from different things.
What do you think?
So very important question, a lot to cover, unpack here. So let's start with the idea that just because a company is changing ownership or changing its name does not mean you should be signing a new employment agreement. Not at all, not even close. It's always going to be concerning and potentially bad news for an employer to demand that you sign a new employment agreement. Now, the fact that the company changed ownership does not mean that she is owed severance. If she continues to work, then she hasn't been terminated and she's not owed severance. But if she loses her job because of the fact that she won't sign the agreement, she's owed severance. And there's another issue here. She's now being harassed and bullied and mistreated in the workplace. That could be a constructive dismissal. If your employer is not treating you properly, that may allow you to say, by not treating me properly, by creating this poisoned work environment, I have a right to treat this as a termination and get severance. So whether she loses her job or if this is a constructive dismissal, we have to focus on severance. So we're going to go and use our severance calculator tool. You can find that at EmploymentLawyer.ca. And let's see how much severance really is owed for her. So she's been in a supervisor role for 26 years. Company says no severance. Well, except you see that she's owed anywhere from 22 to 24 months of severance. That's a significant amount of severance that she's owed. That's how easy it is for you at home to find out how much you're owed as well. Just go to EmploymentLawyer.ca, click on that severance calculator tool, answer 3 questions, and you are done. You'll have the information that you need to know if you lose your job, or maybe if it happens down the road, you'll know what you're owed.
All right, good start. We are warmed up nicely, Lior. We'll take a short break. What employers should never do. That's the main topic. That's on the other side, so stick around. We're just getting started. Lots more Ask a Lawyer is on the way right here on CP24.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
All right, welcome back to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. John Scholes and Lior Sanfir, of course, our lawyer, EmploymentLawyer.ca. We always throw a main topic into the mix. You want to reach out anytime after the show, 1-855-821-5900. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca is that email. Anytime for you as well. Okay, here we go. What employers should never do. Number 1, Lior, give us this one. Assume that a severance package is 1 or 2 weeks' pay per year. Employers never do that.
Well,
never do that.
We talk about employees not assuming what your severance offer is. Well, the same thing for employers. Please, it's not a week or 2 weeks per year of service. As an employer, you have significantly greater obligations towards your employees, and you need to inform yourself of those obligations. You can't go on a website. You can't call the government for that. You have to get some legal advice, because you could owe someone as much as 2 years severance. In some situations, even more than that. And you may think you're doing the right thing. You may think you've read on the website that you only owe a week per year, and you offer that. Before you know it, you're faced with a wrongful dismissal suit. Don't do that, okay? It's not a week per year, 2 weeks per year. It's based on several factors, including the employee's age, position, and length of employment. So please don't make those assumptions, of course, for employees as well. Chances are, whatever the company is offering is not adequate. Please don't assume it's a week or 2 weeks per year. That's simply not true.
And again, pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. That'll clear up most of that for you right away. Number 2 is this: employers should not fire an employee while they're on a medical leave.
Absolutely. So there's no reason to fire an employee on a medical leave because, number one, it could be illegal. It could be seen as a human rights violation. But here's the thing. You may think, I have this employee on a medical leave. I don't need this employee anymore. But if the employee's on a medical leave, they're not coming back to work for a while, you don't know if you're going to need them in a month, in 6 months, in a year when they're ready to come back to work. How can you say today that you don't need them if they're not even able to come back to work? So by definition, almost, it looks like if you're terminating employment when they're on a medical leave, that you're doing it because of the medical leave, and that's illegal. So what do you do if you have an employee on a medical leave? You let them stay on a leave until they're ready to come back to work. When they're ready to come back to work, as an employer, you make all efforts to bring them back. If you've looked, if you've tried, and you then concluded that there's absolutely no role for them, then and only then can you terminate with full severance. But you can't jump the gun. If you do that, you may be on the wrong side of the law.
What we are talking about is things that employers should never do. Number 3, this one is so commonly, or that is misclassify an employee as an independent contractor.
Absolutely. This happens all the time. And if you think about it, it kind of almost makes sense. Well, wait a second. We don't have to put you through payroll. We don't have to deduct EI and CPP. We don't have to remit anything to the government. Yeah, where do I sign up? Well, guess what? If it was that simple, every employer can do that. Every company can do that. We'll just call everyone independent contractors. Think how much easier life would be. Except it doesn't work that way. If you have someone that works for you and they look like an employee and they act like an employee, they are an employee. And by misclassifying them, the only thing you've done is you've broken the law. You're in breach of income tax rules. You're in breach of employment laws. So it's illegal. If you have someone that works for you regular hours under your supervision and direction, they've been doing it for a while, they are your employee. It doesn't matter what you call them, and it doesn't matter what piece of paper they may have signed. The law determines that they are an employee. If you're an individual and you've been misclassified, remember, you may be an employee that has a whole host of rights, including the right to get severance if that employment comes to an end.
As we did mention earlier, you want to reach out to Lior at one of our radio shows anytime during the week, EmploymentLawyer.ca. There's a media tab there, including here locally in the GTA. That would be News Talk 1010, Sundays at 1 p.m. We get our phone calls from the show. We get lots of them every week, and we play them back. We talk about them. Phone call number 2, Lior, is coming up right now.
I've been working in a workplace, and I've been bullied for about 4 years now. This employee is a long-term employee. He's been there for about 25 years. He has a long history of bullying. HR has a huge file on him, but they won't do nothing about it.
So, we should have added that to the list of things employers should not do. And that is, don't drop the ball when dealing with employees that are bad apples in the workplace. So here's the thing. Obviously, if this employee is a problem employee, the employer is not doing something, they're in breach of their obligations. You have, as an employer, obligations to deal with these employees, with problem employees. And the employer's failure to do that could result in a constructive dismissal. It could be potentially a human rights violation, etc. So what does this person do? If this person has complained to HR and they can show that they've complained to HR and the company hasn't done anything, it's time to say enough is enough. That's a constructive dismissal. By not dealing with harassment, by allowing you to be bullied and mistreated by a coworker and just turning away from it and not doing anything, it's as if the company has terminated your employment. They breached a term of employment. Now they have to pay you severance. And that's far better than continuing to go to work and be bullied and mistreated every day. No one should be in that situation. So if you find yourself being mistreated by someone, and if your employer won't help you despite asking for help, it's time to say, no, constructive dismissal, you've terminated my employment, I'm gonna get my full severance and move on. If that sounds familiar or if it happens to you, you call me right away.
Great phone call, appreciate that. We'll get to phone call number 3 after a short break, so there's lots more here to go on Ask a Lawyer on CP24. Please stick around.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
And thank you so much for sticking around through that short break here on Ask a Lawyer. CP24, John Scholes, Lior Samfiru, each week answering all of your questions and making you that much smarter about workplace rights. Reaching out, do it at your own leisure. 1-855-821-5900 is the number. Email ask@employmentlawyer.ca. You can also use that QR code on the right side as well. I mentioned the third phone call from our radio shows. And again, News Talk 1010, Sunday afternoon, 1 p.m. Join Lior and I and call into the show and ask your questions. Here comes call number 3, Lior. Listen up.
My wife has worked for a large retailer for 4 years, full-time. They closed the location. They're going to reopen it again at a different location in a year. They all got permanent layoffs. They were forced to sign a letter that night when they were told, basically saying they will be getting no severance at all. So it'll just be her final pay and then vacation pay.
Permanent layoff.
There is no such thing, John, as losing your job without severance. Full stop. I don't know that I can make this simpler. If they were put on a permanent layoff, their employment was terminated, call it what you will. They're owed severance. And that means that you can't sign a piece of paper saying that you're not going to get severance. That paper is not written, it's not worth the paper it's written on. So this person, of course, is owed severance. And now we're going to go back to our severance calculator tool. You'll find that at pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. I want to show you how we calculated severance and how much this person is owed. So in the customer service role, been there for 4 years, 59 years of age. Company, for some reason, thinks that the laws don't apply to it. Well, guess what? They do. And you can see she's owed right around 6 months of severance. 6 months. Doesn't matter what she signed. Same with you at home. First of all, if the company wants you to sign a ridiculous piece of paper, say no. But if you do, and if it is ridiculous and illegal, it's not going to be binding. But good advice, never sign anything without speaking to me, and certainly always use the severance calculator to find out how much you're owed.
Another way to reach out, you can catch Lior and his team doing their live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. Simply go to stlawyers.ca, stlawyers at stlawyers, and you'll be able to join in and ask your question. Here's the question for this week. Lior says, I was just fired for cause after arriving late for work. In the 18 months I've been there, I've never been late before, and my record is clean. My boss says I have no right to any pay or EI. Can they do that?
Nonsense. Of course they cannot do that. It is extremely difficult to terminate for cause. And the fact that this person may have been late once, maybe even a few times, does not mean they could be deserving of the worst penalty, which is a termination for cause. An employer can only terminate for cause if the employee did something very terrible, if it was repeated, and if the companies try to fix that behavior, but they weren't able to. Then and only then can the company let someone go for cause. So that means that this person, when they were let go supposedly for cause, they've been wrongfully dismissed. That's a wrongful dismissal. So of course, severance is owed, and depending how many years there, 18 months could be owed 3, 4, 5 months of severance, but also, of course, get EI, which could pay you for a year. So no, if the company says that you're terminated for cause, unless you know you've done something terrible, you stole, you committed an act of fraud, unless that's what you did, you call me because that's a wrongful dismissal.
We have enough time to slide in an email before we wrap for another week, but I got to take a short break and we'll get back with more of that right here on Ask a Lawyer. This is CP24.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking around through the break. Reach out to Lior anytime the show's not on air. You know how to do that by now, right? Phone call 1-855-821-5900. Email is ask@employmentlawyer.ca, which is exactly where we're going now, Lior. Got time for one more email. It goes like this. Says, I was hired on a 15-month maternity leave contract. Just 6 months into the job, my boss said it wasn't working out and ended things by giving me a week's pay. How does it work when a contract gig ends early?
So this, John, is what we refer to as a fixed-term contract. So a fixed-term contract, as the name suggests, is an employment agreement for a specified or specific period of time, 6 months, 12 months, some other specific period of time. Now, what happens if the company needs to let you go before then? Well, usually what would happen in a situation where you're let go, you get severance. Well, here too, except the severance that you get is the difference, the balance of the contract. So if you were let go 2 months into a 12-month contract, that means there's still 10 months to go, and the company has to pay for that. So that's why it can be very expensive for a company to let an employee go with a fixed-term contract. I once had a case when someone was let go 6 months into a 4-year contract, and the company had to pay for 3.5 years. So if an employer is going to use a fixed-term contract, they better be sure that they need the person for that period of time and that it's going to work out. And if you're an employee and if you're let go before that contract ended, a day before, a week before, 6 months before, your employer still has to pay you the balance of that contract.
Would you even suggest using a contract for that reason? Why bother?
It makes no sense, frankly, to use a fixed-term contract. May as well use a regular indefinite agreement with a termination clause. If an employer really, really wants a fixed-term contract, they should give themselves an early exit from it. Doesn't really make sense to do that, John.
And that is just about all we have time for on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You can always reach out afterwards and ongoing, and maybe your phone calls will get on this show as well. How do you do it? That phone number, 1-855-821-5900. Ask@EmploymentLawyer.ca is where we go for any emails. Pocket@EmploymentLawyer.ca. Don't forget that website. It's free. It's anonymous. You'll have access to the severance calculator. And join us here back next week again as we educate you even further. CP24.com/AskALawyer. And we will catch you next week, right here on Ask a Lawyer. This is CP24.